Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating paradox all about how we communicate. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the harder we try to sound smart, the less people actually understand us? It's wild. We're going to explore exactly why trying to sound intelligent can completely wreck your communication. And on the flip side, we'll look at some eye-opening research showing that taboo language, yep, those dirty words we're always told to avoid, might actually have some hidden benefits. It's a journey from inflated academic jargon all the way to the science of swearing, and I promise it's going to completely change how you view your everyday conversations.
Okay, let's dive into this with a little experiment. Imagine you're sitting right across from a friend at a table, and they start tapping their finger on the wood. Just tap, tap, tap. They're actually tapping out the rhythm to a really famous song, like the Star-Spangled Banner. Now, in your friend's head, that melody is playing loud and clear, right? They hear the instruments, the vocals, the whole shebang. But to you, all you hear is a bunch of dull, disconnected thuds. Well, a graduate student at Stanford University, Elizabeth Newton, actually ran this exact experiment. She had people tap out well-known songs and then asked those tappers to predict how likely it was for the listener to guess the tune. The tappers confidently predicted listeners would guess the song about 50% of the time.
But here's the reality check. The listeners only guessed the song correctly 2.5% of the time. Just 2.5%? Think about that massive gap. The tappers thought it was obvious, but the listeners were literally completely lost. This perfectly illustrates how terribly we judge our own communication. We just assume that because something is crystal clear in our own minds, it must be perfectly clear to everyone else too. But to the audience, it usually just sounds like random, chaotic tapping. Let's move to Section 1, the curse of knowledge, and see how this builds into our first major concept, which is the psychological trap of knowing way too much. This is a psychological trap that catches pretty much everyone: teachers, CEOs, scientists, you name it. The actor and communication expert Alan Alda hits the nail on the head here. He says, once we know something, it's hard to unknow it, to remember what it's like to be a beginner. When you have a high level of expertise in a subject, it actually prevents you from considering the beginner's perspective. You start using shorthand and referring to complex ideas that they have absolutely no context for. And the worst part is, you lock them out of the conversation without even realizing you're doing it. Economists who study this agree that people are quite literally unable to ignore the extra information they possess. So when a CEO stands up and talks about unlocking shareholder value, to a normal person, well, that's just random tapping on a table. Moving on to Section 2, avoiding bafflegab and jargon. This curse of knowledge heavily influences the words we choose, especially when we want to sound intelligent or academic. Because of this curse, we often make terrible choices with our vocabulary. Have you ever heard the term bafflegab? Milton Smith, the guy who originated the term, defined it as multiloquence characterized by familiar manifestations of abstruse expatiation. Come on. Even the definition of the word is a total nightmare to read. It's basically inflated language. It's whipping out fancy, complex words to deliberately try to sound smart. But here's the secret. It almost never works. Instead of impressing your audience, you just end up deeply, deeply confusing them. To show you just how ridiculous this can get, one communication textbook author shared this fantastic anecdote from their father. He warned that if you try to confuse your audience with inflated language, you're going to end up the proverbial tributary of deification without an adequate means of propulsion. That is a spectacularly complicated way of saying you'll be up a creek without a paddle. It's hilarious when we look at it like this, but honestly, we do this all the time in our emails, our meetings, and our presentations. So the rule of thumb here is, why use a $3 word when a $2 word will do just fine? When you drop words like obfuscate or cacophony, you might think you sound incredibly smart. But remember, the goal of communication isn't to sound smart, it's to be understood. Now, there is one rare exception to this rule. Persuasion researchers note that if you're an expert witness testifying in a courtroom, using big words actually makes you more persuasive to a jury. Jurors tend to think, wow, I don't understand that word, so this person must be a genius. I should probably trust them. But unless you're currently sitting on a witness stand, just keep it simple. Let's jump into Section 3, the native speaker problem. This brings up a massive irony about simple language, especially in global settings, because native English speakers often cause the most confusion. Consider this brilliant observation from Professor Sergio Serrano. He's participated in international scientific conferences for decades. Picture a group of researchers from all over the world discussing highly complex technical issues in English. Because they learned English in a classroom, they use very precise, formal grammatical language. Understanding in the room is remarkably high. But then, an American native English speaker joins in. They take over and start dropping culturally specific idioms, saying things like, "Let's take a holistic approach," or "We really hit it out of the park with this one." Immediately, communication crashes. The non-native speakers can't understand the colloquial slang, and they can't easily translate their advanced technical concepts into that casual slang the American prefers. The native speaker, by trying to be casual and relying on idioms, literally breaks the communication chain.
And finally, Section 4, the science of swearing. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is where this leads us next. If smart words are bad, what about the dirty words we're told to avoid? To figure this out, we have to look at the work of psycholinguist Dr. Timothy J. He's one of the world's leading experts on cursing. Over his career, his research team has recorded over 10,000 people swearing in public settings. That's a lot of swearing. And they didn't just do this for a laugh. They did it to study the complex emotional mechanics of why humans use taboo language. And this brilliantly illustrates Dr. J's counterintuitive findings, which were even featured on CNN. It completely shatters the myth that swearing is just a sign of a poor vocabulary. He found 5 surprising ways cursing can actually be good for you. First, swearing can actually be a sign of intelligence and verbal fluency. Second, it's a marker of honesty. People who swear are often seen as more genuine and unfiltered. Third, and this one is wild, cursing improves physical pain tolerance. Yelling a swear word when you stub your toe genuinely helps you manage the pain better than shouting a neutral word. Fourth, it's heavily linked to creative expression. And finally, and maybe most importantly for human evolution, it replaces physical violence. We throw expletives at each other so we don't have to throw actual punches.
So the absolutely crucial point to take away from Dr. J's decades of research is this: cursing is an emotional vent, not a vocabulary deficit. People swear to express a massive spectrum of human emotion. We use these words to get out anger, manage physical pain, or creatively convey shock, frustration, and even intense happiness to others, without resorting to actual physical violence. Taboo language acts as this highly efficient tool to instantly convey deep, raw feelings to other people. It's just a fundamental part of the human psychological experience. Which brings us to the ultimate paradox of this explainer. The very words we're taught make us sound smart. The bafflegab and the jargon are actually the ones that isolate us, confuse our listeners, and totally ruin our communication. Meanwhile, the taboo words we're constantly taught to suppress are deeply connected to our honesty, our emotional processing, and our intelligence. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. The next time you really need to connect with an audience, will you drop the $3 words and maybe use a 4-letter one instead? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this completely changes the way you think about the words you choose every single day. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.